Do you remember this game? Hoo boy, Catherine. If you played this game, you are both cultured and a degenerate at the same time. Catherine is a puzzle platformer that released back in 2011. Fun fact, this game was basically like an art demo for Persona 5. It follows the story of Vincent Brooks as he's caught in a love triangle between his longtime love, Catherine McBride, and this new girl, Catherine. I don't trust anyone who's played this game and claims they did not have a crush on Catherine. Ironically, Catherine the game would get the Persona treatment. In 2019, an updated version of the game would release, Catherine Full Body, and would turn this love triangle into a love square. Yes, they did. Atlas added a brand new route, the Catherine route. Do you remember this game?
Can you restore the balance?
Oh boy, Darksiders, what a whirlwind of chaos and controversy. The first game got released in 2008 and was called a God of War ripoff, even though it's based in two different cultures and Darksiders is just the slightest bit more accurate. But that first game managed to develop its own cult-like following and would cause a sequel to get released.
And his name was Death.
Y'all had to be there on Darksiders 2 announcement day. It was such a positive reaction. Death was so well received, and all this time later, I still prefer him to War.
I have an offer in mind.
And then the apocalypse came. THQ went under, but that wouldn't be the last we see of the Horsemen. Darksiders 3 and Fury would come out in 2018, with mixed reception. To be frank, I didn't care that Darksiders 3 and Fury weren't as good as the other games. I was just happy to have this series back. Y'all had to understand, when THQ went under, we really didn't think we were going to see the Horsemen ever again. And who knows, maybe we'll get a fourth mainline game someday. Neo The World Ends With You comes out next week, so, do you remember this game? By now, I'm sure everyone knows about the original World Ends With You. The anime came out, it finally got its sequel, but god, this game was so good. And was slept on for so long. Once upon a time, Neku was my favorite Square Enix protagonist. I really related to him. His relationship with Shiki was just so beautiful. I don't normally ship, but if anyone was meant to be together, it was these two. I'm just so glad that this franchise is finally getting the recognition it deserves. I can't wait for Neo. Warning, this episode of A Bit More Love does contain foul language and may be unsafe for work. Viewer discretion is advised. Do you remember this game?
How can someone with such a big smart brain get hypnotized like a little bitch, huh? Oh, Shadow Lord, I love you, Shadow Lord. Come over here and give Vice a big sloppy...
love you.
Nier was one of those games, I feel, that just came out at the wrong time. And Replicant, or Gestalt, was the game that walked, so Automata could run. I'm the biggest Automata Yorha stan, but I've always been of the opinion that while Automata had the better gameplay, original Nier had the better story. And all this time later, my stance has not changed. I'm just so glad that the original game got upgraded and re-released, so an audience who maybe didn't know that there was a Nier before Automata can experience it. Do you remember this game?
Michael.
Drakengard 3 is actually a prequel to Nier. Yeah, bet you didn't know that. Now, Taro says the flower in Zero's eye isn't connected to the lunar tier, but Alex, I'll take Cap for 500 please. In all seriousness, I feel like Drakengard is another Gestalt situation. I feel like a lot of Taro's games are like that. It came out a while ago, it's a little dated by now, but the narrative was so good that the dated gameplay didn't really faze me. Zero is an amazing protagonist. Her relationships, her strange, Reverick relationships with Octa and Dito, her bond with Mikhail is what drives this, and sometimes we get to forget just how depressing the overarching narrative is. Zero is literally going down a list of killing her sisters while the world around her crumbles. Let that sink in for a second. So as glad as I am that Nier is getting more recognition in the gaming community, I would like to see Drakengard eventually come back into the light. Do you remember this game? If you didn't, I wouldn't be mad or surprised, because I barely remember it. I don't think I'll ever forgive Ubisoft for giving one of the franchise's most underused characters, Ezio's only student, who could have been the series' first female Chinese-centric lead, just this little spin-off. AC Chronicles isn't bad, not like Unity or Syndicate were at release, and I actually like Yoon's narrative. I just think it's wasted potential. Part of me is really hoping that since AC Infinite is confirmed to be jumping through multiple eras, maybe Yoon will finally get the respect she deserves. Underused. Criminally. Do you remember this game?
I'll see you around, Wolf.
Let's go back for a second. During the Telltale era, back when they were in their prime, there was a game called The Wolf Among Us. Hot take, this was, in my opinion, Telltale's crown jewel, their magnum opus. It took an IP that wasn't very well known, gave it a platform, and it thrived. Bigby was awesome, Faith ripped my heart out and then fucked with my mind. Bluebeard is dead meat. It's a Telltale game, so you pretty much know exactly what you're getting. If you liked The Walking Dead, you'll like The Wolf Among Us. And now I wait for season 2.
I'm here to ask you to be those things once more.
Do you remember this game?
Well, you gotta name this.
Elizabeth.
Oh! I haven't done one of these in a while, but let me tell you, no one was more excited for Burial at Sea than me. Infinite was a game that I loved and adored. Elizabeth and Booker were characters that I loved and adored, taking place in the city of Man where everything began, or rather where everything ended. While I loved Bioshock Infinite, its story made my brain hurt, and I thought Burial at Sea was a less convoluted, but a much more fitting end to this story. Really hoping we see more of Bioshock one day. Do you remember this game? If you played Dissidia or were around in the Square Enix space, say, 10 years ago, you've probably seen her before. Meet Aya Brea, the protagonist of Square Enix's Parasite Eve and The Third Birthday. The best way I can describe the series, well, more Third Birthday than Parasite Eve, imagine if Resident Evil and Final Fantasy had a baby, and I think this was made by the same team behind Crisis Core too. Aya's just iconic, such an underrated protagonist, really hoping Square brings her back someday. Do you remember this game? Asura's Wrath, in my opinion, would have worked better as an anime or a movie. The gameplay wasn't bad, it controlled rather well, it was just so repetitive. However, the bare-boned, repetitive gameplay was more than made up for in its narrative. I don't think anyone would disagree that Asura's Wrath was narratively phenomenal. People talk about Asura's power level, they don't talk nearly enough about why he's on this blood path. This man clawed his way out of basically hell more than once because he could sense Mithra was in pain. This man killed God because he made his daughter cry.
Wait!
Unfortunately, Asura's Wrath has been lost to the ages. It released on Xbox 360 and PS3, and I don't see a remake, a remaster, or a sequel coming anytime soon. But I think everyone should at least experience the narrative, the world of Asura's Wrath, even if it's just watching the cutscenes on YouTube. Do you remember this game? It's rather ironic that pretty much everyone's forgotten Remember Me. It has such an interesting premise on paper. What if our memories were data? Fun fact, this game was developed by Don't Nod, the same team behind Life is Strange, and now that I look at Nilin closely, I see a bit of Max Caulfield in her. This was actually one of my favorite games of that year. I loved Nilin, and I loved the way this game played, and that score! A good soundtrack will always hook me in, and this one had a full-on orchestra. A really good one. Part of me hopes that Nilin and Neo Paris come back one day, but it likely won't. Do you remember this game?
A famous explorer once said that the extraordinary is in what we do, not who we are.
Unpopular opinion. I prefer these newer games, the Soul Survivor trilogy, to original Lara. I find that this Lara is more an actual person, a young woman who's eager to make her mark on the world but gets way in over her head, as opposed to just a femme fatale. I don't dislike the older games, it's just this is my preferred rendition of Lady Croft. I'm hoping we get another game soon.